begin the presentation. And so this is a very important topic, and it does bother a whole lot um, on academia and on research and on writing and presentations, and a whole lot of people um, get get confused about this, and there is a whole lot of emerging um, uncertainty about certain aspects of this, and yeah, but this the aim of this presentation today is to give the basic foundation so that we get to know, get clarity as to not necessarily what to do, but understanding the basics of it and why we should avoid plagiarism. Because from my experience, oftentimes people think that plagiarism is just about copying and pasting, but you'll find today, hopefully, that it does go beyond that and borders a whole lot on academic integrity. Yeah. So the topic of my presentation is plagiarism: understanding, detecting, and preventing academic misconduct. And I've been introduced as yeah, and so I don't need to talk much about myself further. But our discussion today will cover four main areas. Um, we'll define plagiarism and its various forms and explore how plagiarism is detected in academic settings and address emerging issues relating to AI and plagiarism and outline ways to prevent plagiarism while fostering a culture of integrity. Understanding what plagiarism entails is essential. It's so we're going to talk about what this is and what the types of plagiarism are. And we do have various definitions of plagiarism, and I thought to bring this from various sources so that we can see the various perspective and get to understand what the idea is about plagiarism. So the Merriam-Webster dictionary defines plagiarism as to steal and pass off the ideas or words of another as one's own without crediting the source. Now you can see, I mean, lots of commonly people think plagiarism is just about the words. No, it's not just about the words. The ideas of someone else, passing it off as yours without crediting the source is plagiarism. Now, the Oxford University Student Handbook defines it as presenting someone else's work or ideas as your own with or without their consent by incorporating it into your work without full acknowledgements. The APA says plagiarism is the act of presenting words, ideas, or images of another as your own. And the WPA says plagiarism occurs when a writer deliberately uses someone else's language, ideas, or other original materials without acknowledging its source. Um, some schools of thought do not agree with the PA because of the emphasis of the deliberately, because as we would find shortly, plagiarism can be intentional or unintentional. Now, intentional plagiarism are deliberate acts of dishonesty, such as copying and pasting without citation, purchasing or submitting someone else's work, fabricating sources or references, paraphrasing to avoid detection while hiding the original source. And this has serious consequences. Now, unintentional plagiarism, on the other hand, usually stems from lack of knowledge or poor citation practices, such as forgetting to cite a source. Many of us have been guilty of this, forgetting to cite a source. um, incorrect or incomplete referencing, poor paraphrasing that mirrors the original too closely, and refusing even your own previous work without disclosure. That's called self-plagiarism. It is still considered plagiarism, but there are um, better ways of addressing it. For example, I do recall a paper I had put together, and I cited data, and I forgot to cite the source of the data, and I submitted it. Um, the reviewers got back to me and said, "Hey, you need to cite." Like, oh, that was an error. It wasn't intentional. But one of the ways to prevent this also is when you have co-authors who also look through to be able to identify some of these gaps. But that's unintentional plagiarism. Um, yeah, but it's still plagiarism. So plagiarism is not just a personal ethical lapse. It directly undermines the entire academic ecosystem. It undermines trust in scholarship because when plagiarism enters the academic space, it calls into question the authenticity of work. If one scholar is plagiarizing, it becomes difficult for peers and the public to trust that published findings are valid or original. I mean, also erodes institutional reputation. Universities and research institutions build their reputation on credibility and excellence. So when plagiarism is detected, especially in high stakes publications or dissertations, it can tarnish that reputation for years. It also violates core academic values upon which institutions are built. So, what makes institutions, academic institutions, reputable have to do with the values of honesty, fairness, accountability, and plagiarism breaches all of these. And so it's a shortcut that undermines learning, research, and fairness. And it also devalues genuine efforts. I mean, imagine students who work hard to complete their assignments, honestly, being graded alongside those who copy and paste from the internet. It creates a culture of injustice, discouragement. Now, importantly to note is that it leads to disciplinary actions. Now, this is not the reason why you should avoid plagiarism. You should avoid plagiarism because of the others. But if you don't, note that there are disciplinary actions because it's an integrity issue. It's not about avoiding disciplinary actions, it's about academic integrity itself. So, so whether it's intentional or unintentional, plagiarism often met with academic penalties, and it could range for students failing grades, academic probation, could lead to expulsions, even degree revocation. In professional research, it can also lead to retractions and legal consequences. So ultimately, plagiarism doesn't just harm the individual, it chips away at the foundation of what academia stands for. That's the pursuit of knowledge, integrity, and so what are the types of plagiarism? So let's just break this down in different types so we can recognize and avoid them. Some are obvious, others are easy to fall into by accident. So knowing the difference actually does matter. Um, so there is direct plagiarism. It's when you copy and paste someone else's words into your assignment or work or papers without putting it in quotation marks or citing them. Like borrowing someone else's exact sentence and pretending you wrote it. And it's very risky and you can easily get caught. Now there is self-plagiarism. Now it does sound strange, right? But yes, you can plagiarize yourself. You can reuse a paper or parts of a paper from another class without telling your instructor or and that's it, it's self-plagiarism. So it's always good to ask if it's okay before reusing your own work. Also, even in papers that you publish, you must cite yourself just the way you cite others. So there is what's called part writing, that's mosaic plagiarism. Now, this one is quite sneaky. It happens when you copy bits and pieces of different sources and mix them up into your writing without quoting or citing them. So it's like this patchy thing. You put in different stuff together so that it looks beautifully different. Um, so even if you change a few words, if the structure of phrases are too close to the original, it's still plagiarism. And there is also the paraphrasing plagiarism when you rewrite someone else's idea. So this is just beyond words now, and you rewrite them in your own words. And so the key here is that you still need to cite the source. Even if it's in your own words, the idea is not yours, right? So paraphrasing plagiarism, and there is accidental or unintentional plagiarism where you fail to cite sources or use quotation marks or paraphrase appropriately, like we discussed previously. And finally, there's also what's called the source-based plagiarism. This includes making up sources, citing things you didn't actually read, or twisting what the source says to fit your own argument. And this is plain dishonesty. It can easily get caught. So plagiarism isn't always about bad intentions. Sometimes it's just not knowing the rules. And that's why this webinar is here to help us uh, build skills to stay safe, write with confidence, and give credit the right way. So let's look at some real world cases where plagiarism had serious consequences so we can understand just how serious this has taken in both academic and professional settings. Yeah, so a few years ago, Karl Theodor Zu, Gothenburg in Germany, um, was a rising star in German politics. But when it was revealed that large parts of his doctoral thesis were copied from other sources, he lost his title and had to resign. And the university revoked his PhD. Also, at a university in the US, the students submitted a exam paper with large copied sections from Wikipedia and blogs, and they claimed they didn't know that it counted as plagiarism, but they were still expelled, and most schools treat plagiarism as a violation of the student code, regardless of intention. And also, in 2006, Javier Viswanathan, her debut novel got a major publishing deal. But soon after, readers noticed passages almost identical to books of other authors. And her book was withdrawn and her reputation never recovered, even though she said the similarities were unintentional. So unintentional plagiarism can still have very, very dire consequences. So note that in academia, even copying your own previous, like we said, self-plagiarism can get traction. So those are some dire consequences um, in in the research world. So we need to take note of this carefully. Now, the point here is not to scare you, but to show you that plagiarism is a real issue with real consequences. And the good news is that by learning how to cite properly and manage your writing processes, you can avoid plagiarism. So, yeah, we've talked about this. Certain plagiarism in academic settings. Detection methods have actually evolved and they keep evolving. Um, so initially it was manual review, then we got to soft-skilled tools. And so we're going to talk about some of these and then about emerging issues as well. So traditional methods and manual detection involves, the reviewer or the instructor's familiarity with students or um, There's writing and comparison with known sources. Now, while this is useful, it's time consuming and limited by human subjectivity and skill. But digital tools have evolved, and you have plagiarism detection software. I think the most common is Sonnet, and lots of people have, other students have defined in their mind that plagiarism is is when you have high Turnitin scores. But this is not correct. From what I've talked so far, you realize that this is not really accurate, because you could even have zero Turnitin score and still be plagiarizing. So software like Grammarly and Turnitin can use vast databases to identify similarities. And while they can enhance efficiency and accuracy, they are not full. So now design tools can cleverly paraphrase content, and AI generated work. And all sports also occur. Cultural differences in citation practices also pose challenges requiring continuous improvements and human oversight. So it's not about softwares, right? It's more, I think the issue of plagiarism is more about honesty and personal integrity than it is about detection. And so when thinking about avoiding plagiarism, um, the best approach is actually personal integrity. I do recall while I was doing my PhD, all the I never my walk through plagiarism software, and um, on one occasion someone asked me, "Have you scanned through Turnitin?" And I said, "No, I don't need to." And they're like, "Why don't you think you need to?" I said, "Well, because I know what I wrote. I mean, I didn't try to take someone else's thoughts or ideas. So there is no way Turnitin can give me a high score. So there's no point at all looking it through Turnitin." And so that personal, when you're confident about your work, you know that you did not plagiarize, then you're in a safe ground. Now, what software can do for you is um, help guide against unintentional plagiarism, where you perhaps have failed to cite when you should have cited and stuff like that. But bottom line is having that personal integrity, avoid intentional plagiarism. That's very critical. But also watch out for unintentional plagiarism. So how to avoid plagiarism? So I think prevention generally would focus on, education, best practice like we're doing here, culture building, and we're going to talk about some little bit of ways you can do this. So we've said it, always cite your sources, whether it's direct quotes or an idea, a statistic, or even an image. If it came from somewhere else, cite it. Don't assume something is common knowledge, but except you've seen it in at least, some say 3 to 5 credible, unrelated sources, then you can assume that it's common knowledge. But the best approach is not to assume common knowledge. Now, paraphrase properly. Paraphrasing isn't just about swapping words. It means fully rewording and restructuring the idea in your own voice. And yes, even paraphrased content needs a citation. I'll keep track of your sources. It's easy to forget where a quote came from after hours of reading. So tools like Zotero or simple annotated biographies can help you stay organized and avoid accidental plagiarism. Also, get familiar with various citation styles, whether it is APA, MLA, Chicago. Each time has clear rules. Learn the basics and always check, the style of your institution or the journal you're submitting to once. Um, now, that's where citation software come in. They also support with that. But from my own experience, I found that sometimes it's not always accurate. So sometimes they need to double check what um, software like Zotero, Mendeley, or and others, have done. Because I've had quite recently, I had even people that took almost 2 months going back and forth with the journal. Journal were like, this wasn't the style they wanted, and went back and forth. Even though we use the software, it's still, I don't know what the issue was. We ended up doing it manually. So use plagiarism tools wisely. Um, I think we've talked about that, and but importantly is when in doubt, ask for help. Always ask for help. It's far better to check than to guess and risk a violation. So always remember that a good writing is not about being perfect. It's about being honest, thoughtful, and thorough. And that's what academic integrity is all about. So just a bit about how to quote and paraphrase them responsibly. Always add quotes to the original sources accurately. Use quotation marks to distinguish exact words from paraphrase content. Paraphrase by fully understanding and rewarding original ideas. Avoid patch writing. Ensure that your paraphrase is genuinely original. Um, Cite all sources to uphold academic integrity and avoid plagiarism. So, I- just some few examples of quoting responsibly. Now, these are just a few examples. You can see how to quote and note that there are short quotes and long quotes. So always ensure you stick to um, the guidelines of whatever style you're using. So when quoting, use the author's exact words, put them in quotation marks, cite the source. And for longer quotes, use block formatting with indentation. Now, for those long quotes, no quotation marks are needed. Always give page number. Don't overuse quotes. Use them only when the original wording is strong and critical to making your point. So, what is a block quote? I just thought, since I mentioned that word, just to give a bit of an idea of what it is. Different academic styles have slightly different rules about block quoting, but the core idea is set it apart, don't use quotation marks, and cite properly. So, that's that. Note that overusing block quotes can weaken originality. So, use block quotes very sparingly. Now, you can see that different uh, styles have different guidelines, but just ensure that you stick to whatever guidelines for the citation style and the journal that you are submitting to, and of course the institutional guidelines as well. Yeah. So paraphrasing shows you understand the material. Like we've talked about, you don't just change the words. You write the idea in your own voice. It's still always know that it is still someone else's idea, and you need to cite it and place the citation at the appropriate position. Right. So these are examples of a correct way to paraphrase and uh, better ways to paraphrase work. So let's talk about a big issue that is quickly changing how we think about plagiarism. That's AI writing tools. Um, Tools like ChatGPT that came up suddenly years ago. are capable of writing essays, answer questions, even generate references. But using them carelessly or secretly can lead to academic violations. And note also that um, AI commonly does what's called hallucination. It can generate ideas or references that do not exist. So it hallucinates a whole lot. So take note of that. So often we find students face full response from AI to the assignment, but it's not different from submitting someone else's work. You didn't write it yourself, and you didn't acknowledge the tool, it is considered plagiarism in most tools. Now, there are broad boundaries. So even if you're just using AI to rephrase or restructure your ideas, over reliance without understanding or citation may represent your own contribution, and guidelines are evolving. Now, some institutions allow limited use of AI with clear disclosure. Others are more strict. So it's always good to check with the policy of the institution or the journal or the instructor what is appropriate. For example, in Canada, just last week, the major funding agencies for the tri agency released new guidelines on use of AI, um, which makes it clearer, where they say they don't prohibit at all the use of AI, even in grant writing. Just they need to properly acknowledge the use of those tools and how you use them. But there was a total prohibition on reviewing grants. A grant reviewer, there was total prohibition on reviewing other people's grant applications using AI. The reason is simple. Um, AI is not confidential. It goes into a third party source that is accessible by humans. So when you upload content, you actually hand it over to a third party, and so that's a problem. It's so you don't do that. So that's the Canadian rule as of last week. Um, but what now? Journals also have their own rules. I've so I'll give two examples from my own work. I've used AI to edit some of my content. And when I was going to submit to an Elsevier journal, the guideline was you don't need to report the use in editing. Only report it if you use it in things like generating ideas um, or, uh, or in data analysis and stuff like that, right? So that's the rule for those journals I looked at. But another journal I also submitted to recently clearly stated um, any use of AI should be reported to them. So always good to check with every journal, every institution, what is permitted. Like it's a very broad area. Guidance are evolving, and like I said, plagiarism is not about anti-plagiarism is not about avoiding detection. It's about being it's about integrity, personal integrity. So once you know that you're doing the right thing and you're checking with the various institutions or journals about their own guidelines regarding this and you stick to those guidelines, you're safe, not just to the academic community, but even to yourself. So there are detection tools, of course, and there are several tools um, that claim they can detect AI generated text or even graphics and all that, but they're not always.
So for a second, Dr. Berryman, we're not hearing you. So I'm not sure what's going on. The voice is cutting out.
Yeah. Okay. He wants to change from his headset to.
I think hello.
We
Yes,
can
we
hear
can
you
hear you
now.
now.
Okay,
Thank you
yeah,
so
sorry,
much.
my headset battery went off. Apologies. Yeah. So let me just go back one slide and yeah. So generally, essentially, I was saying that the boundaries are blurred and stick to the guidelines of the various institutions or journals and act responsibly with the use of AI is very important. Personal integrity is very important. And in this new landscape, transparency and integrity matter more than ever. Just like with other sources, cite, disclose, and use it to support, not to substitute your own learning. That's very important. Yeah, so it's important for institutions also to foster an environment where honesty is valued through honor codes, support systems, and transparent policies that encourage student, faculty, and staff to uphold ethical standards. So, in conclusion, plagiarism remains a serious challenge, especially as AI transforms academic work. And by understanding its forms and improving detection, addressing new ethical concerns and promoting preventions, we can safeguard academic integrity in the digital age. Integrity is the foundation of learning, and plagiarism weakens that foundation. So I want to provide a list of acknowledgements. Now, all sources cited throughout the presentation, I'll list them shortly. Now, note that all images that were used in this presentation were sourced from Microsoft 365 Content Library, and there was also AI assistant from Microsoft Copilot with respect to the images and the preparation of the presentation. But I take full responsibility for all the content of this presentation. So also I got some bit of ideas from OpenAI's ChatGPT and other sources as well. And these are the references for this presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Ejamai. Thank you so much. Questions have piled up in the Q&A, so we'll quickly dive into them. So Dr. Chama Mbachu is asking you to throw more light on self-plagiarism. I mean, sometimes it sounds almost like impossible that we can plagiarize ourselves, but she wants to know more.
Yeah, so self-plagiarism is, as it sounds, it's self-plagiarism, and plagiarism is, taking someone else's words, thoughts, or ideas. Now, the tricky part is that, well, the ideas are yours, right? Yeah, but if they're published in some other sources previously, it is important you cite it appropriately. Now, the reason again is also note that when you're publishing articles, recall that there are various kinds of license agreements in those stuff, and once you publish some journals, you may not even actually have the full copyright to it, right? So it's important you cite. So let the rules that guide citing the works of others also guide citing your own work, and you'll be on safe grounds.
Okay, so Mustafa is asking, he says he saw that you did a broad classification of intentional and non-intentional plagiarism, but he's saying that subsequently he now saw like 6 classes. That could you just run through maybe on your slide those the fine-tune the different types of plagiarism again beyond being intentional and unintentional?
Okay, maybe I should share again slides, but importantly is not necessarily because this is not you're not going to exams as to how to classify plagiarism, right? And different people can classify plagiarism in different ways. What's happening? Okay. Yep. So I talk about intentional and unintentional, which is broad, right? And then yeah. So this is probably where is that?
There's a slide before.
Yeah. So this is probably what you're talking about, right? It's just just a way to understand the various ways in which you can plagiarize and not know that you're plagiarizing, right? Because direct plagiarism, virtually everyone knows about it. But there are other ways people do things that they think they're not plagiarizing and they are plagiarizing. So that's the whole idea. It's not necessary to create a class. When I was creating this, there are various other classifications that people have about this, but the whole idea is just do the right thing, and irrespective of classification, you'll be safe.
Okay. So there's also another question that is, Ifeoma is asking you to discuss this AI-driven software for plagiarism, such as Authenticate. Could you throw a little bit more light on them, the softwares?
So I assume Ifeoma is talking about software that detects AI content.
No, she said plagiarism particularly, like Authenticate.
Software you talk about this software that was creating this, right? But the common software that is known as Turnitin. Grammarly also does that. I think Turnitin now probably I understand it now has an AI detector as well, but I know that some institutions like my institution, for example, has even stopped using Turnitin officially because of its weakness in the AI era. So they found that it wasn't useful to keep on subscribing to a software that is not evolving as fast as the market or as the industry. But you also there are software like Originality AI that can do both plagiarism and AI checks, and several of them. But the thing, like I said, the key here is not about avoiding detection. It's about personal integrity, right? And that I think that's the key thing here, because the common challenge that I see often with people is that they are trying to have low detection scores. But scores is not what defines plagiarism. Having a Turnitin score of 25% does not necessarily mean that you plagiarized. And having a Turnitin score of 5% does not necessarily mean that you did not plagiarize. What this software do is when you put in students' work into Turnitin, for example, and it shows high score, the instructor now has to go back carefully to scrutinize to see whether citations were done properly, whether it was really plagiarism and all that. So high Turnitin score is not necessarily plagiarism, right? It only allows the instructor or the examiner to do further work to check. When it's low, there's the assumption that perhaps there's no plagiarism, but these are not always the truth. So don't focus on trying to avoid detection. Focus on trying to maintain academic integrity.
Okay, that's a good one. So Ifeoma is also asking, can you explain more about that patch writing? Because you mentioned it as, it's here.
Okay, yes. So let's assume you're working on a paper and then you have you download 5 to 6 sources, and then you copy and paste half of one sentence, and then copy and paste half of another sentence, and then the third one, and then it makes a whole new sentence that was not in any of the papers, but it's still copy and paste. So when you read the entire sentence, it's a whole new, or the entire paragraph is whole new stuff that doesn't that is not verbatim of any of the sources, but it is pieces of them directly. So it's not paraphrasing. It is actually part writing. So it should be avoided. It is plagiarism, and it should be noted as such.
Okay. So another question is from Choma saying, thank you very much, sir, for your presentation. So how do we get access to Turnitin or I authenticate? And she's also saying that some plagiarism detectors flag references as plagiarism. So she has two questions. She has two questions there.
So
how can we have access to these tools, the software?
So again, many institutions do have those, but like I said, I can even use Turnitin. When I was doing my PhD, we had Turnitin in my university, but I never used it. The only time I used it was when I was submitting my thesis. So the system automatically does it and gives you a score, right? So the emphasis should not be about software. And true, Turnitin would take your reference. I'm not, if I'm even beyond that, like my own PhD I did, I used the what's called the sandwich model of thesis-based, publication-based thesis, right? So some of my chapters were exact copy and paste of my published articles, right? So I just took it from journal and put it there. So when you run it through, Turnitin will always say high plagiarism because you just inserted the exact journal pages within, but it wasn't plagiarism. So don't focus on software. Focus on your personal integrity, because software can be wrong, and often is wrong, particularly in the era of AI.
Okay, that's good. Victor is saying, thank you for your presentation, sir. And take, for instance, if someone coincidentally publishes an idea that is contained in his unpublished manuscript, can he charge such an individual for plagiarism? And what steps can he take to recover the idea?
You get the story.
He says he has a manuscript he's written up, is not published, but then suddenly he sees someone's published the same exact idea as him. So can he charge that individual for plagiarism, and how is he going to recover his unpublished idea that's published by someone else?
This is very interesting and very common. That's the truth. Well, I gave some examples here about someone who published a novel and won an award with it, and at the end of the day, it was found out. But now, I'll give you this story I learned of in an institution. I won't mention where, I won't mention the institution, but if I do mention the institution, perhaps a lot of people would know it. A student did a work. I can't recall if it was undergrad or graduate student, but did a work. And something happened. The supervisor took the work and published it in his own name and did not even have the student as a co-author. Now, when he published it or submitted it for publication in a journal, the journal editor wrote back to say he stole the work from another professor who had published exactly the same things in the same words. Now, here's the interesting thing. Two different professors in the same institution stole a work, with none of which was theirs. And then the argument now came. They wrote to the institution to say, look at this issue, it's an integrity issue, something must be done about it, and then an investigation started. It was in the course of the investigation that none of these two professors who published this work actually had the data for it. They couldn't present the source of it. There was nothing. And one investigator found that it was a student of one of them who actually did that work, and none of the two published submitted articles had the student as an author. This is a clear ethical violation. It is stealing, it is academic robbery, not just academic, it's criminal as well. So there are ways to address these issues. Most institutions have guidelines as to various ways, but one, it must be reported, right? And then I think the various institutional process will get in place to investigate, and hopefully the right thing is done, and that's the way it goes. Sometimes it can even lead to imprisonment because and stuff like that, because it depends on what it is, right? Because it's actually theft in some way. There are cases like that as well. Yeah. But when it's something like it's patented and stuff like that, I mean, there's a whole lot into that. Yeah. But importantly is, guide your work a whole lot. And when collaborating with people, ensure you have non-disclosure agreements, ensure that there is a track record of who thank for digital ages. There should be a track record of who and where your materials are transferred, right? So so that's, and I would also mention that there was another one I read of last week. Sorry, this was, I think it's more recent and it's still ongoing, where a work was published in a journal, and later on it was found out that it was, someone submitted a paper to a journal, a very good journal, and it was rejected. And then much later it was discovered that one of the reviewers went and who recommended rejection, published it in another journal. So lots of these things happen. And the first step is to report to the appropriate authorities.
Okay. So Suleiman is saying, would copying a writing style amount to plagiarism, even when the topics, the content, the ideas are different? So writing style now.
You mean by writing style now?
Yeah, if you copy someone's writing style, is that plagiarism?
Is it in terms of language or in terms of not? I mean,
it could be. I guess it's in terms of language flow. You know, where the way the idea flows. You know, that's usually more like when you want to talk about writing style.
It's not someone else's words. It's not someone else's ideas. I mean, it's like saying, someone say, I want to go to school, and another person says, I want to go to school. That's a style of speaking or communication, but that's not plagiarism. I didn't just plagiarize the Americans by saying, I want to go to school, right? I only communicated in their own language, right? Or in their own approach, so it's not.
Okay. Okay, so this question, I don't quite understand it. I think maybe it's the other. He said Ishaku Ibrahim is saying, if I want to cite a statement from an article and the date is 1990, but the main paper is 2022, which one will I cite? So I guess maybe I don't know. What I'm thinking from this question is the original quote was in a paper that was published in 1990, and there's another paper that referenced it in 2022. Which does he cite?
This is a very beautiful thing, and for bringing this up. Now, the rule is to as much as is possible, cite the original source. If you are able to find the original source, cite it. I've come across situations where I've seen papers where someone else cited someone else and I couldn't find that original source. So that's an exception. But the rule is this person you're citing cited someone else. So you should cite that original person.
Okay. Then Gloria is saying, even after acknowledging the author of the work you've cited, would it be still be plagiarism if you used another work from that same author without citing it? So you have a paper and you have multiple citations, multiple places where you use a particular author with his or her several works, and you cited one, and since it's the same author, is asking if you avoid citing all the others because it's the same author but different publications, would that be plagiarism?
I mean, you're citing someone else's work and you didn't acknowledge it. Recall that even citing your own work without acknowledging yourself is plagiarism, right? So how much more citing someone else's work partially and not citing the rest? So yeah, cite as much as you ought to cite. As long as it's not your words, it's not your thoughts, it's not your image, please cite.
Okay, then Promise is asking, what steps can you advise us to take to avoid or prevent accidental plagiarism?
Is by principle, ensure that you don't intend to plagiarize, you intend to maintain academic integrity. Now, once you have that there, the next thing is, what are the best ways to prevent? One is, thankfully, there are software that can help you in citation. Two is you have peers, right, who can, so if you're writing, and that's the beautiful thing, if you have co-authors. Sometimes when it's just you as a sole author, there is the tendency to have such an error because when you look at your work over time, you miss over lots of stuff. But when you have co-authors, they're able to identify areas you need to cite and those gaps. So those are some of the ways to prevent self-plagiarism. I do appreciate that. Okay, there are sometimes you need to be. I'm not saying you must always have co-authors. Yeah, but that's one way. And also having a friend, having a colleague take a look at your work also helps with that. Your instructors are there to help. So you do everything possible to help with that. And yeah, and that's also, I mean, in this modern age of AI can also help you. I mean, you put it and say, oh, well, yeah, check to see if there's anything I need to cite here. I missed the citation. It can, but then it can also miss because I don't trust AI so much. I don't even trust a lot. I don't. You recall the early days of ChatGPT, where ChatGPT told me about an organization under ECOWAS that doesn't exist. I've done lots of work with ECOWAS, and I know that such an organization doesn't exist. But it told me that there was this particular. So there is a whole lot of hallucination with AI. So whenever you use AI, always double check, thoroughly check to be sure that it gave you the right information. So AI can actually miss. I don't trust it, so I believe it can miss this information. But then it's not. You can use it as well to check. Maybe you can detect some things that you miss, but always thoroughly check.
Okay, so Oguchukwu was saying that many universities now, when they're doing promotion for their academic staff, they would run their publications through a plagiarism software. And what you talked about, the high score, not necessarily meaning plagiarism. Sometimes they turn up high scores and they tell the lecturers that because it has a high score, it didn't pass. So how do we reconcile that?
Many people do not know the principles behind software detection of plagiarism. And there's that base thinking that high scores means plagiarism. So I think a whole lot of that's why I talk about institutional support, institutional guidelines should do this. And then, whoever is affected can contest with evidence. And I think that's the way to address such.
Okay. There's another question is from Catherine Mukalazi, and it's related to the question, I believe, from Ibrahim that was talking about an original paper. Hers is an original paper in 1970, but she got the information from a current paper published in 2020. And her institution requires papers not older than 10 years. So how does one go about this?
Yes. With me now, the idea of recent citations, I think is totally wrong. It is not scientific. I think it is. So there is a difference between academia and science, and people mixed up, institutions mixed up, human beings mixed up, but there is need to really, really demonstrate that this is wrong, right? Imagine me citing, I want to talk about gravity, and I have to, and the idea was, what's his name? Oh, how can I forget his name? The guy who apple fell on his head. Yeah. So, I mean, I even cite Galileo, or I even cite Jesus Christ in the Bible. It's not wrong, right? So I think there's a whole lot of coming to in the while trying to ensure that people are more up to date with recent science. There's a whole lot of rigidity, and this needs to be addressed. And certain institutions are ignorantly rigid on these, and I think it's that's where knowledge people in academia should speak up. These are where there should be debates around these issues. There is nothing new under the sun. So one can find very, very good, like for my PhD, for example, I think one framework which I used beautifully well and was published in 1979 in a WHO journal. And I still find that framework very useful today. And one reviewer actually asked why I should be using 1970. And I said that this is very, very, very relevant. It's a forgotten work by someone, but I found it very, very relevant in my context today. And that's what I would use.
Okay, so I will hand it over to our director, the director for Ivan Research Institute Nigeria, Professor Echezona Esanole. So over to you, sir.
Thank you so much, Jemai. Thank you so much. And I will just actually raise my hand to add even a recent example, which will be the people will be very familiar with, which will be the treatment for HIV prevention of mother-to-child transmission using AZT. This groundbreaking that changed how what we know about preventing HIV was done in 1994. And I remember every study that you go back, you are going back to that study because that was the study that demonstrated AZT as a so you can't just use just because of the age to agreeing with you that you can't just use, are you going to deny that they established that foundation of HIV prevention by demonstrating that AZT prevents HIV from this? So you can't. Anytime you're talking about that, the history of the AZT, then you're going to talk about that. In some cases, there are also where people have done a review, and you can use that. So I'll give you an example. The APIS framework developed by Greg Error. Most of you have met him at the NISA conference, and he's going to be there again in September at the NISA conference. he developed the APIS framework. But after 10 years, he also went back to look at the APIS framework and then do that. So you can decide to now cite this one that did a systematic review. So what he did in that place, he described the APIS framework. He described how it has been used over the 10 years. So you could cite that. But when you're saying the APIS framework developed, then you are going to go back to his original development to now cite that. But you could cite, so that's another way if your institution become very, yeah, again, people in institutions should, like you correctly said, raise that so that people don't, but also this is another way that you can reflect that if there is an update in terms of those skills. Sometimes there is none, so you're going to go back to the original. But when there is, you can now reference this paper that looked at 10 years of APIS framework. There's another one on Cypher, where you have Cypher 2.0, which is an upgrade to Cypher 1.0 or 2. So you can also cite which came out about a year ago, 2 years ago. So you see those things in a lot of those frameworks, they do update after like a decade to be able to do that. And when you're doing systematic review, I think where those things came from in academia is that when you're doing systematic review, you want systematic reviews that are most recent of 5 years ago, not 10 years ago, because so much happens in science in 5 years. So you do want systematic reviews but in that systematic review, like Borima talked about, they will be referencing the original studies that are old. That because those are the basics that are still there. But those systematic review, if you wanted to look at management of leprosy in Africa, and then you don't want to look at how leprosy was managed 20 years ago. You want a systematic review of drift, but you also, in that systematic review, might find a drug for leprosy that was developed in 1950 and still being used now. So that reference go back to 1950. So it depends on his understanding of what you are actually trying to reference. And that's one of the places people that are in promotion committees in universities should advocate, because the only people who can change this is people who are already professors, who can say, you know what, I agree. I remember one of the places in one of the institutions in Nigeria, this story was told to me because they told the student they cannot use citation managers for their paper. This is because the professors didn't know how to use citation managers. So they said no, they cannot use it. What do you mean? Nobody writes anything or meaningful these days without using a citation manager for your bibliography, because we used to write them by hand, but nobody does that now. So things have changed, and the only people who can make those changes in our institution is those people who have nothing to lose. The professors. Nobody is promoting them. Nobody is demoting them. They are the ones who can make the change, because they can say things are changing, just like AI. I was very much against it, but I am telling you the truth today. I am learning it because I realize that it is going to be the future. And it was bad. It's improving, and along the way, it's going to be. If you don't have it, you are going to be, be really working too hard. I remember it's just like citation manager. So again, if you use AI, you must go back to review it. That's the most important, not that you can't use it. So that's the important thing that is there. So I just want to thank you a lot for this and for the communication that we have. I think this is something that we have all recognized over the years that has done for us. If there are people make a mistake about this is something that people complain about in Nigeria, and people should be very careful about that. If you're joining our research team, one of the things that you will sign is that you will not use another person's project. We have a research in progress that everybody that has a project they're writing joins the team and be able to present their work so that it can be reviewed. There are two things that happen. Everybody in that team signs that, including me. Actually, we have kicked out people because they didn't want to sign it. So I sign it. The reason I sign it is that you can sue me. You can have protection. You can write about it if something like that happens. If you present on our team, nobody in that team can use that work for research without you. So even when, for example, when this has come from people who didn't have a PhD, who come with a master's, who come with a bachelor's degree in our team and say, I have this idea because I've been working in the HIV program or TB program or leprosy, and I have this idea. Once you present in our team, nobody in our team, it may be that you may now say, okay, along the way, we're working on a grant and we realize that you can't be the PI with a bachelor's, that we will have somebody else that, and we will ask you, this is some people that will suggest that you say, I'm okay with that. Even though they are PI, you are going to be on that grant. Usually we would say you are going to become the program manager for that grant, 100% for that grant of your time, because that's, again, is your idea. Why is that important? The respect for people's work is not part of our tradition. You notice that if you go and show some Senegalese, come and it looks nice, everybody shows Senegalese and nothing happens to it. If you go back in our history, if you remember the song, thank you, Mr. DJ, for telling me my song. Thank you for playing my song. I remember the artist saying he made zero amount of money in it. Why traders in Onisha were making a lot of money because they were turning out the tapes, selling it. Nigeria from the South African lady didn't make any money from it, from the tape, but it was a very almost like a national anthem in Nigeria at the time. So traditionally, our respect for other people's work is not there. And that's not about it, that's a cultural thing. Because again, people say, copying people is a form of actually acknowledging them. But as things go and there's commercialization of ideas, and the federal government recently, about how many 2 weeks ago, Federal Minister of Education set up Research Commercialization Committee, which I serve on for the federal government for Nigeria. And the idea there is to say, how do we help people? Because that's why people are not coming. Because they feel like if we bring an idea, people take it. So how can we protect those people, support those people to commercialize their ideas in Nigeria? And that is something that they are working on very well, which I think is an important part of what you are speaking today on. So this is a very important topic. We are going to try to bring that again every year. I think what we're going to try to do is once every year, we're going to bring one of these kind of lecture on there, just to remind us again, just to refresh up our mind again, that you can plagiarize yourself. And that's something that everybody, if you can understand that, then you can understand how easy it is to plagiarize others if you can actually plagiarize yourself. So you have to be very careful about giving credit for what people have done. It doesn't take away from anything that you have done to give people credit for what they have done. It only says that you are a good scientist. And that's to me, that is the learning today. But I think the interaction today was really very beautiful to listen to. And I want to take the opportunity, Professor Nick, I think we're coming to the end, right? To be able to talk a little bit about the implementation science conference that we have. It is a very important thing. Ejimai is going to be there, and he's going to be leading a session also at the conference. So make time to come. It is a very important conference that we have in Nigeria. This will be the 10th year it has happened. Last year, we had people from almost all the 5 continents, not almost, all the 5 continents actually at the conference. It is an important place for you to meet you're going to meet people from the National Institute of Health. You're going to meet a lot of the people that develop those frameworks. Like I said, Greg Aarons that develop APIs, most people use it, is going to be there. It's a very good, not just for you to learn, but for you to network. You are going to meet a lot of the people like Jemai, a lot of the people that you have read their work, you have worked with, you have referenced their work, you have cited their work. It is actually very nice to actually meet them in person and be able to do that. But there is actually a third day that is reserved for purely mentoring and capacity building. This is a place people get an opportunity to present their first abstract. This year, we have the highest abstract submitted, 260 submitted for that this year. That's a huge conference that is there. We weren't able to select all of them because of space, but what we're doing is that we are trying to increase the number of people we select for oral presentation. That way, they get a chance to present in what I would say at home base. You're presenting to your people, first of all, before you go out there to the world to present. So we are looking for people who their first time presenting abstract, that is there. The other thing you will learn at the place will be on how to develop abstracts from programs and how to develop manuscripts from abstract. Those are going to be available. So that third day of the conference is set aside for capacity building. So just take a look, go to the website, take a look at the agenda as it comes out tomorrow, and then you can see the agenda. And if you haven't registered, you have to the 31st of August to register. But it will be a beautiful 3-day conference in Enugu, in Abuja.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So the other thing that I want to mention is take a chance to say thank you to Professor Nieka. We have been doing this for a long period of time, these conferences, but we are taking it to the next level of different things. And what we're trying to do is to see if you have any topic that you would like to us to bring. If you have any speaker that you would like us to bring for the country, please let us know. And what we have made a thing is that we can bring any speaker from anywhere in the world to speak. And if you have a very good person you think is very good, let us know, and we will bring them from anywhere in the world. That is the network we have to be able to let them know, because when we tell them, we send them what we have done for the last 10 years. And most of them, like Pio Nelson that came in from Sweden last time, he said, this is the largest population of Africans I've spoken to in my career. And this is somebody that is well known in information science. And that's what we have been trying to do. Yeah, so if you need that, please let them do that. The other thing I want to take opportunity to do is about the CTAIR Scholar Program. This is our dedicated 1-year conference, mentored capacity building. There is a 6-month didactic and there's a 12-month mentoring program. We will train in implementation science, but also we do train how to write grants. That is important thing, so that you can write your small grant, because good science also requires funding. And you're going to see a lot of people discuss that at the conference. But also, this is a 1-year program. The announcement comes out twice in a year. We accept people. The next one is going to be in January 2026. So we will talk more about it at the NISA conference. So please be able to do that. This is our 4th cohort of people that are going there, and we have been very, very impressed by what we have seen. But thank you for making this what we consider as a top implementation platform, capacity building platform in Africa. We didn't say that, the NIH said that, but they have also supported a lot of those capacity building that we have done in those conferences. And that's why they have been to Nigeria, to the NISA for 10 years that we have been with them, and they will be there again this year. So thank you all, and please do take the email and let us know what topics you want to bring and all of that. So thank you everyone for attending. Professor Nieka, the announcement.
No, just to say, to reinforce what you've said, thank you. There's a link in the chat for various things. A link to see previous webinars, a link to rewatch this webinar. We have also a link to our website. We have a link to the 2025 NISA conference, so that you can find out details about registration. And of course, there's an email to reach us promptly if you want to.
What about the link for the revolution? I thought there was a one for evaluation of this.
It will come, yes. So there's an evaluation of this webinar. It will come in your email, so that you also give us feedback about this particular webinar and answer a few other questions that will come on the evaluation. And that is also a way to show you that we have your contact and we reach out to you where there are new programs from Ivan Research Institute. So thank you so much for joining, and see you next month at the first Monday in September for another very interesting webinar. Thank you. Thank you, Ejimai.
Thank you, Ejimai. Thank you so much. Thank you very, very much. Very much appreciated. Bye.
Yes. Bye-bye, everyone.